As we explore this idea of what it is to become more like Jesus, we're kind of diving into more of the practical side of that, of not what it is to become more like Jesus, but how do we actually do that? Last week I read to you Philippians 3:17. It says, "Join in imitating me, brothers and sisters, and pay careful attention to those who live according to the example you have in us." And so one of the things that we can do to become more like Jesus is really to look at those who we recognize are walking with Jesus. They know Jesus intimately, and to figure out what did they discover? How did they get to this place? I had the opportunity today to sit down with a godly couple that have given their life to serving in missions, and they've served in Mexico, and they're in their 80s and still serving, and you could just tell their passion for wanting to serve Jesus and serve that community. Every time he would describe the need in the community and those who are lost, he would begin to tear up a little bit, and I could recognize immediately that he loved those people, but he loved those people because he loved Jesus. And I think God desires that kind of love, that kind of intimacy. He desires all of us to experience that. But how do we do it? One of the things that I've really focused on in my ministry, Lisa and I, my wife, our life verse is Philippians 3:10. And Paul says, my goal is to know him, to know Jesus, to know him, the power of the resurrection, and the fellowship of his sufferings. And so my first goal in ministry is always to seek Jesus, always to know him more intimately and deeply. And when you think about this, Paul was in a similar situation to us. He was no longer in a situation where he could just go walk with Jesus like the disciples had the opportunity to. But he could go be around those people who walked with Jesus. He could ask them questions. He could say, hey, what was Jesus like? And how did he respond to this? And we can do the same thing. God has given us his word, and we should be deeply abiding in him and pursuing Jesus in his word, pursuing Jesus in prayer, walking with him with a desire to grow with him in intimacy, to grow in that abiding relationship, trusting Jesus with every aspect of your life. And as we begin to grow in that intimacy, that's, Jesus' goal is for us not only to walk with him, but know the power of his resurrection. And we've been talking about that as you've been hearing in 1 Corinthians 15, this idea of resurrection is essential to everything we are and everything we do. We are called to know Jesus and the power of the resurrection, because that power that raised Jesus from the dead, he died on the cross and he went into the tomb, but that power that raised him from the grave is in us. And by that power, we can overcome this dark world, and we can be light in it. And that's God's desire for us. And when we know him, when we understand the power of the resurrection, I don't think that's a formula that you just plug in and check the boxes. I think this is Paul's lifelong pursuit, is to continually desire to know Jesus more fully, more intimately, to understand the power of the resurrection, and how he himself can overcome the world and the temptations of the world and the fear of death. And then he says, I can fellowship in the sufferings of Jesus Christ. And Paul examples that to us. As you read through all that Paul goes through, he models a life surrendered to Jesus Christ. And I think God desires the same for all of us. But again, is that our expectation? Is that our goal? Is that our aim? If it's not, we've got to go back and start with this intimate relationship that Jesus offers to us. We've got to return to the foundation. Jesus is the chief cornerstone, and that's the only foundation on which we can build. And so we need to return to that. We need to begin to explore what does the resurrection mean in my life, in your life? And then how do I, based on that fellowship and the sufferings of Jesus Christ, to live the life that God has for me and for you, that God would be glorified through who I am and what he's called me, and how we come together as a body of Christ, as the church, to serve him and his kingdom until he comes for us. So I pray today that you would just think about those three things. How can you grow more intimately into a relationship with Jesus? What do you need to do today? How can you explore? What does the resurrection mean to you? How is it impacting your life? If it isn't, then you're missing something, and we need to return to that. How does the resurrection of Jesus Christ affect your life, my life? And then how does that lead me to the fellowship of his sufferings? What has God called us to? Ultimately, he says he will give us joy to the full. But that doesn't mean it's not going to come without hardship, pain, and suffering, and sacrifice. And so what do we need to give up? What do we need to take up today to become more like Jesus, starting where we're at and becoming more like Jesus? So I pray this would be an encouragement to you today. God bless.